Welcome back everybody, it's good to see you. We're going to be doing some landscape painting and working big to small. I start off my panel painting with burnt sienna, and as you can see I'm already putting in some darker patches where I figure I'm going to need a darker background. I'm very loosely using this photograph that I took in the Hockley Valley in Ontario. More as a guide. I'm not going to try to paint every single leaf. That would be a little bit insane, I think, but nevertheless it's a great challenge, and when you're working on anything that appears at first sight to be pretty complicated with a lot of detail, it's a good idea to work from big to small, using big brushes to begin with, working down to smaller brushes. In other words, we're working from the general to the specific, and the farther along we go, the more specific we get. Here are the colors I'm using: ivory black, cad yellow, cad orange and cad red, and burnt sienna. As I said, I use burnt sienna in the background, and then there's some burnt umber in there too, and green umber from Old Holland, cadmium green pale, that's a Winsor and Newton, ultramarine blue, and titanium white. So you can see here I'm loosely blocking in some colors that will be background to the final leaves that kind of sit on top of this. So it's very rough and I'm keeping it very, very loose. I don't want sort of square edge shapes, so I'm using a tree and texture brush. You could use practically any well-worn brush, or get an old filbert brush and cut a few bristles out. You basically just want to get something that's fairly rough. I'm using obviously a straight edge brush for those trees, and now I'm putting a little bit of detail in the background, clearly using a much smaller brush for that kind of detail. I normally use a liner brush, and now some of the leaves are going in with a fan brush. It's actually a bristle fan brush, fairly stiff, and I'm just using one corner of it. And now I'm using a liner brush again for smaller leaves. If I'm using a fan brush to put in leaves and that sort of detail, I tend to only use the corner, and of course it is a bristle as opposed to a soft fan brush, which I reserve for mainly for blending. I purposely keep the painting as loose as I possibly can. There's always this temptation to get into detail too soon. And so it's good to remember that when you look at a picture such as the photograph I'm working from, to squint down and just see some of the larger shapes, and never start your painting with the detail. You need to work from the back to the front, generally speaking. Having said that, I'm certainly no perfectionist and find myself going back and putting background details in when I should have put them in a lot sooner. But that's the wonderful thing about oil painting. It's very forgiving, and you can go over things as long as the paint is not too thick. Again, working from big to small, and also working from thin paint to thicker paint. The highlights being thicker, but the shadows should always remain quite thin. If the paint in the shadow area is too thick, it's possibly going to catch the light when the painting is hanging on a wall, and that will make the shadows lighter, which of course is not what you want. So keep the paint thin in the shadows and thick in the highlights as a general rule. Again, as you can see, I'm using this fan brush, and I'm keeping the paint fairly thick. I don't mind if the light catches thicker paint in the highlights, such as on these leaves. There's a lot of white I'm using, obviously, in this very pale green, and daylight tends to be kind of cool. White is cool, so that works. No, this is not me playing the guitar in the background, although I have thought about recording some of my own for future videos. That would be kind of fun, but it might be painful for you. So let's get back to whoever this is playing this. It was great to have you watching me paint. I don't normally paint at that incredible speed, but I hope you enjoyed it. And if you'd like to see more, please subscribe. I'm working on new videos. I'm going to be doing a series of still life paintings, as well as more landscapes and quite likely some portraits. So stay tuned.